As you can probably imagine, I try a lot of different headphones and IEMs every day of every week. So I have to be really, really careful when it comes to which ones I will actually allow myself to buy. Otherwise, I would definitely be broke by now. So, that being said, I couldn't help myself with this one. This is Chris with MajorHifi, and this is the iKKO Asgard OH5, the newest IEM in my personal collection. I'm frankly astonished by how little talk I've seen about this eco release, not only for its incredible sonic qualities, which we'll get into shortly, but also because it's the world's first headphone to feature a lithium driver. So let's talk about that for a second. It wasn't long ago that the consumer audio community was introduced to beryllium magnesium drivers, frequently featured in very high-end IEMs and headphones like Empire Ears Odin or Focal's Utopia. Beryllium has favorable qualities for headphone drivers as it's the most rigid metal with an exceptionally low density. Driver material considerations involve a careful balance of both rigidity and density, thus making the choice of lithium in the Asgard OH5's driver particularly interesting. While lithium is the lightest of all metals, it isn't quite as rigid as beryllium. There are also differences in the magnetic qualities, with beryllium being diamagnetic, it repels magnetic fields, and lithium paramagnetic, it attracts magnetic fields. And while I would love to get into more of the acoustic specifications about lithium, there simply isn't much out there right now. Lithium is a very new material to be seeing in drivers. Anyway, let's open up the box and see what we got. The box sleeve and design are pretty cool and modern, each in their own way. The first thing you see opening up the box is the Asgard OH5 buds, sitting securely in some high-quality cardboard and padding. Now, this is what makes the box worth keeping. A drawer opens up from below, and we see everything else that the OH5 comes with. There's a very well-insulated and sturdy single crystal copper silver-plated cable with a 4.4mm balanced jack, a somewhat firm and definitely stylish leather carrying case, a keychain, an extensive selection of foam and silicone ear tips, these 4-pin to 3.5 and 2.5mm adapters, an informative guide, and what looks like either a warranty card or a certificate of authentication. And that all fits neatly inside this rather well-designed box. I, for one, am a very big fan of how these look. They have these very sporty angles on them, kind of reminds me of angles you would see on a sports car. And they have this like silver and purple color. The silver is due to the titanium alloy that's used in the housing. And the purple kind of has this gemstone-like detailing to it that reminds me of IEMs that you would see from the company The Audio. Now, like I said, the housing is titanium alloy, so these actually get a little cold, or they will be whatever temperature it is that you leave them in. I didn't really find that annoying. It wasn't a very big deal. Just thought it was worth mentioning. Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to see all the points and edges on these and be a little cautious, thinking that maybe this thing is going to stab them in the ears. And I was also worried about that, but I thought for the most part, they fit very comfortably. And there were times where I just had to give them a little poke because that corner piece was, in fact, getting into the corner of my ear a little bit. But once again, didn't really mind. Wasn't a big problem. Didn't provide too much discomfort in any way. And I also found that the fit on these really fills up your ear in such a way that it leads to a lot of isolation that I wasn't aware of until the doorbell was ringing for 5 minutes and I didn't hear it. For the most part, I really like the cable. It is very, very well insulated, and it also looks pretty cool. It's wrapped in this transparent, really thick plastic, and you see the silver plating through it. My only complaint about the cable is that it is maybe just a little short. Not too short. Like you can, have your phone in your pocket or your DAC in your pocket, and it really shouldn't be much of an issue. It's still going to reach your ears. Still think that the cable could have been just a touch longer, but that's really the only criticism I have as far as look and feel goes. Now, let's talk about what is obviously my favorite part about the OH5, which is the sound quality. The stage going from left to right on these was really, really nice and very, very high definition. When parts were panning and sliding, it really felt like it was touching every last millimeter of my face. There was no notchiness in it. It didn't just jump from one to the other. There was just something extremely fluid about how it dealt with its pans that also resulted in giving it a particularly wide image as well. And actually, it was because of its really wide capabilities that mono parts like snare drums felt really, really centered and like they were sitting right behind your forehead. And that was just because when everything else is so wide, when something is bringing it back to the middle in mono, it's just particularly dramatic. A very unique quality about the imaging as well was that parts had a way of being distinguished between going into your ear and going past your ear. So, for example, I was listening to the track Be Sweet by Japanese Breakfast, and the vocal parts in the chorus sounded like they were going into my ear, while the synth parts sounded like they were kind of flying past my ear. Hard to tell you why that is, but it was very distinct, and it's a quality that I don't hear very frequently in many headphones, let alone IEMs. Overall, the imaging is just extremely accurate and very unique, very entertaining, adds a lot of intrigue to a listen, and it complements and works with a very, very carefully balanced EQ that, as I'm about to get into, was also really, really clean. And it was because of this that I felt like each and every part that you heard on a track was elevated and it sat in the mix, but you could also focus right in on it and hear not just that one part, but all of the layering that goes into each and every part of a mix. Starting with the low end, I would say that accuracy was really the name of the game with the OH5. I didn't notice any scoops really anywhere in its overall EQ. And a lot of the times when I say natural, or rather when people hear natural, they might think of a headphone that scoops out a lot of the lows in order to make room for everything else. It's kind of a lazy way to avoid masking. That wasn't the case at all with the OH5. It has very strong lows, but they don't infringe upon other parts of the balance. So I was listening to the track Prester John by Animal Collective that has a really heavy acoustic kick drum in it. And the OH5 was able to deliver all of those subs with a lot of strength, a lot of very realistic strength. It didn't sound coded. And while doing that, though, it wasn't masking any other part of the mix. It seems like it brought the low end up just enough to give it forcefulness, to give it rumble, but not so much so that it's muddying the mix or masking any other part of the mix. It really sits in there balanced, but still extremely powerful. There's going to be a theme of perfection in this review, and that also applies to the mids profile, which I thought did particularly amazing things to vocals. I thought that it did a really good job dissecting a vocal part so that you could hear the fundamental, the fry, and the air in it all at the same time. It blended it together, but it also chopped it up in a sort of analytical way that allows you to hear each one of those qualities in a single vocal part. Also, there was maybe a very, very small boost in the low mids that I wouldn't say was really noticeable in the overall quality, but there were certain parts that brought the low mids out of it, and one of those parts I would say is snare drums, and snare drums had their deeper transient in them brought out with a lot of strength, and similar to the kick drums, kind of felt like it was tapping me like right in the forehead. Acoustic guitars also sounded excellent and full on these. It dealt with the high mids that are present in distortion really, really well. If you're familiar at all with microphones, the mids profile on this really reminded me of like an AKG 414 condenser mic, which, if you don't know, is a really high-end condenser mic that's in studios everywhere. It frequently gets used to record vocals. So that was a really nice sound to hear in the OH5. And finally, my favorite part to pay attention to on any pair of headphones, but particularly the OH5, is the high end. And there is something to be said about the high end on these. I didn't find it loud, but I found it crystal clear. As I mentioned, I think in my last video review, my very common highs test for really like the top of the frequency spectrum is Cranked by Panda Bear, because there's a very, very high-pitched frequency in it. And when I was listening to it, one, came through beautifully. Two, I realized that there are other frequencies like it in the track that I have never noticed before until I listened to them on the OH5. So that's a really nice, elusive quality to have in any headphone to, hear parts that you wouldn't have heard without it. But that being said, even aside from those like impossibly high-pitched frequencies, the way it treated vocal air, reverbs, hi-hats, all of it was just so crisp, sandy. Hi-hats had like a really nice, like pointy quality. I felt like the high frequency roll-off started a lot later in these than it does in most headphones or IEMs. Maybe started at, like 13 kilohertz or 14. I don't really know at that point, but definitely more than 10 kilohertz, which is what I would say, usually that's where the treble roll-off begins in a headphone. A lot of the times when I am telling myself that I like high-end in headphones and I like headphones with a lot of high frequencies, I kind of have to ignore the fact that they are also making my ears bleed. That was not the case with the Asgard OH5. I didn't have to do any pretending. I was able to hear all of those really, really high pitches without any harshness. And I would say that a frequency was sooner to become imperceptible than it was to become harsh. Now, when I do reviews, I try to think of, who would like this headphone. Even if it's something that I'm not the biggest fan of, I try to think of somebody who might be looking for something like it. I'm going to make an exception here for the Asgard OH5, and I'm going to highly, highly recommend it to just about anyone. I really feel like there's something about its balance, its soundstage, just everything about the way that it sounds, and also the price being under $500, that it just falls into a Goldilocks zone. This is as close as you get to perfection under $500. Just a little note, I was using the HipDAC 2 amp from iFi. It's a good DAC. Not a lot of extra qualities in it. It doesn't color the sound so much, and it has a balanced jack. That's why I was using it. And I tried using a bass response correction on it, and I tried using an impedance matcher, which are two of the features on this DAC. And I ended up turning both of those off. And honestly, it's up to you. This part becomes a lot more subjective, but if you're using a DAC to listen to these, which I imagine you are, since this has a 4.4 jack, I would really recommend not coloring the sound. Really, I think that the OH5 has a near perfect sound signature that doesn't need any correction. Don't try to fix what's not broken. It is near perfection for my ears at least, but I also think a lot more people would agree with me if only more people knew about this thing. I have hardly seen any talk about this. This should be what the buzz is about right now. This is an IEM under $500 that has qualities in it that I've heard in IEMs that are thousands of dollars. So that's why I bought it, and honestly, that's why I think most of you watching this should seriously take a good look into it, at least start paying attention to iKKO, because I didn't hear about iKKO until I was given the OH5, and this was an excellent introduction to the company. I am extremely, extremely impressed with this. And that is why the iKKO Asgard OH5 gets a gold star. 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, absolutely loved this thing. Anyway, this is Chris from MajorHifi. If you want to see more reviews like this, go down below and click like and subscribe. There's also my written review for the iKKO Asgard OH5 down below, as well as links to buy it. So thanks again. I'll see you next time.